So when you were in the Smoke Long workshop, they gave you writer's prompts at the beginning of
Yeah.
every day. Is that how that worked?
Yes.
Well, I wonder if you and I could talk about writing prompts. I've never used them before, but I like the idea. Just something to kind of get the juices flowing. What were your thoughts about, that as a device, as a tool to just kind of use outside of the workshop?
Yeah, I have to be honest, for the longest time, I wasn't a big fan of prompts. And again, this is something that I did to myself. The insecurity just is so self-generated and these rules that I'd made for myself. We've talked before about how when I graduated with my writing degree from UNO, from the University of New Orleans, I was like, okay, now I've validated as a writer, I have a degree. Now everything that comes out of my pen has to be brilliant. And that was a really nasty thing to do to myself. And I think that the other thing I did was tell myself, I never said like, I don't do prompts. Prompts are not for me. I wasn't that kind of person because different folks need different things to get them through the writing process. But I had sort of screwed myself up in the head by saying, well, I'm a writer. I should just be inspired by my everyday life. Let me just wait until the muse comes by and drops something in my lap. And to be fair, those 4 50,000 word pieces that I've got were all from like a first sentence. Well, 3 of the 4, because the 4th one we had, was for our season 3 where we were just, like, hey, let's see if we can do this in this time. And so the other 3 came from that inspirato, that flash of the first sentence. And I was like, that's it. And then it was like off to the races. So I never really looked into prompts because I was sort of like, oh man, I got such a crazy life, all these crazy adventures. I'll just wait until it happens. But it wasn't until I had this Smoke Long workshop that I am 100% into the prompts, because I think it also comes from the years where I was doing that improv theater or back around the turn of the century, where I would be getting, you get usually when you're trying to get prompts for, narrative improv or just improv scenes, you're like, hey, everybody, what's something that fits in the junk drawer that you would take to the beach with you? And then you start doing a scene like that. And so I think I just sort of put in my head that prompts also are just these sort of like, hey, today's writing prompt is dish soap. And it's like, okay, well, that doesn't do much for me. But with Smoke Long, there was a lot more intricate sort of like each day with the prompts that they would give you, there would just be a little bit more of a theme. There would be a little bit more investigation into the idea. It wasn't just a word or a thought. It was just this sort of like a sense of when did you do this or how did you do that? So it sort of was asking me experiential things. And as a writer, that's something that I really, really love. Like, when was a moment that you felt silence? When was a moment that you forgot something? And that's what really helped me. So I'm 100% on board with the prompts. And I always was for other folks to use. I just never looked at them too seriously for beginning my own things. But now, man, I love it. I love it. But the thing is, I'm interested in what you're saying. You were thinking about trying to get prompts for a story that you already have in progress.
Yeah. And I'm glad that you brought up dish soap, right? Because what is a writing prompt and how does that work? I'm no expert, but the ones that I've seen that really energize my creativity, the ones that might give me a better leg up on the start of a story, aren't just a thing or the quality of light in a room or a character. There has to be some sort of implied conflict or action that's part of the prompt. And so I dipped a toe into the internet, and it came back, mangled. But anyway, I took a look and I found a writing website providing prompts as part of a story competition. And I really liked the prompts. And so I kind of wanted to share a few with you.
Sure.
Yeah. And so the first one here is write a story about someone who trusts or follows the wrong person. So, you and I could take that same prompt and have wildly different results from it. I don't think that gives you too much. so that you're going to get a lot of samey, but it gives you something that is an implied conflict, or that sets up polarized forces in opposition. Center your story around something that doesn't go according to plan is another one that I really like. Write a story about someone who tries to fix a mistake but ends up making things worse. So, I mean, these kinds of prompts, I see a lot of value in this kind of prompting. And so I've got this thing, that I've been working on for 28 years. And I don't really know what it's supposed to be because in the process of my refill last week, I kind of figured out this is what you were doing with it, and you can't approach it that way again. I think every time I've gone back to it, I've approached it the exact same way, and it's just not going to work. So I kind of want to come up with maybe a few prompts on my own. Like, I'm okay writing my own writing prompt now that I see that the format is kind of, all right, well, what is one interesting thing that generates conflict? So I might use like an AI engine to generate 100 ideas, and I'll kind of thumb through them and see if one of them strikes me. Because I've already got some of it drafted, and I'd kind of like to see if some of what I have could lead to something else. That's the other way. I was thinking about reading the whole thing and trying to write my own story prompt based on what I have, which is kind of a clean way of saying what's the story really about. So anyway, I just wanted to kind of tee that up as a thing, because I've never really tried to use a prior draft to generate a story prompt for something that I've already started.
Yeah. What I found out about myself was in this workshop that I was doing, getting these prompts, and and within the prompts too, they did have a varied amount of them. Like, I was talking about how they sort of ask, like, what's the time that you forgot something? Or some, a moment you felt silence, like I just said before. But within the prompts themselves, also, they said, hey, alternatively, how about taking one of these pictures, writing something on one of the pictures. They also had random spinny wheels. So you would go and follow a link and it would give you a random word. And then it would get, I think one of the prompts, for example, was people, and it was a place, and then it was sort of like a thing. And that sort of like helped you to kind of, it was like first person was the perspective, and then another wheel was a person. And then, so there are all kinds of different prompts. And I think that they just work in different ways for different people. And the thing that I really liked about them, and I think the thing that brings you into your own story, is that it just sort of like cracks something in your memory or experience that you were like, wait a minute, I forgot about this moment. Those are the times that I really like a lot, when I'm like, I forgot about that moment. I can write about that moment for this prompt. And you suddenly have, a piece generated that you're like, wow, this is great. I made something out of this horrific trauma.
Right.
So I think that that's great, that if you're you're kind of looking at your own story, just trying to find that hidden doorway that you forgot about, or that you put boxes in front of in your own brain to say, wait a minute, you know what? I could look in this room and I bet there's a lot of fun stuff that'll help me enhance this piece.
Yeah. And for me, I'm really looking at it as, can I use these to create something brand new? Maybe not dredging up, specific life lessons or pain, of a specific instant that actually happened to me in my life. But very often when I see these story prompts, my brain just lights up like a Christmas tree. And I'm like, ooh, what could that be? And I start kind of combining all these different things. It's really cool. So I kind of want to, try this out. I was wondering if you had any interest as part of our season 5 that we could drop some of these and actually share them back and forth, where if I have a writing prompt that I really like, I could give it to you and see if it energizes you, and that you could do the same for me. And of course, our listeners out there, if they're hearing the writing prompt and they want to run with it and share what they got out of it, that'd be great too. tiffininwritingworkshop@gmail.com.
Ah, yes. That sounds like a great idea. All right. I'm there.
I mean, there's a lot of ways to go. You could actually go into history, for example, and tell it from a perspective that's different from the hero. Like, everybody's the hero of their own story. And so at some point, you can kind of go back in time to a period that you really like. Maybe you're a huge, Renaissance fan. I would love to see a peasant's eye view of the world, because most of the old stories, tend to focus on leadership and royalty and, valiant knights and whatnot. I'm sure there are tons of stories.
Gawain.
Right, right. I'm sure there are stories that tell that, from the point of view of a peasant, but certainly their challenges and their opportunities are going to be completely different.
One of my other favorite ways to get prompts is just by reading other works. I love when I am able to read another piece on a lit mag somewhere or in a novel, and something just sort of like floats away in my brain from the piece that I'm reading. Like maybe it's a sentence or a phrase, and that phrase or that word or that idea kind of like drifts off separately from what from what I'm focusing on. And then suddenly it's like, hey, wait a minute. What if you wrote a story about this, that, or the third with that idea in mind? And I love doing that too. So, it's as old as time. The more you read, the better your own work is going to become. Maybe that's a pretty good writing exercise, perhaps as well, is to just come up with prompts like we're going to be doing for each other now.
Yeah, and I remember in school, and maybe in workshops, but I definitely remember the idea of going to a coffee shop or some public location and eavesdropping and trying to write down one interesting line of dialogue and using that to begin a scene. And so that's another way to sort of find writing prompts just literally floating around in the air. If you've got interesting people that you kind of come across, or you hear something phrased in a way that's very unique and compelling. The challenge then would be to incorporate that line of dialogue into your first draft. I would say don't feel pressured to keep it, because sometimes, it is the flash of inspiration. It's the spark, but the spark doesn't stay. It just starts the fire. So that's another way to do it. But all of this is to really point towards when you're having a hard time starting. And this has never seemed to be your problem, Tim. I think you constantly have things going, and this is more applicable to me because I have a harder time beginning. Again, just multiple competing priorities, but yeah, but I get really energized. I can feel it in my head that it just lights up. It's so exciting when I am challenged by, here's kind of a literary Mad Lib where you're trying to fill in the blanks of this potentiality. And it's just so exciting.
I felt a lot of that in the Smoke Long, and that's why it was so like revelatory for me to be, wait a minute, why haven't I been using prompts all along? And I'm really, really working hard not to go down that alleyway of regret and saying, man, how much writing could I have been doing if I was just like trying to get myself into prompts earlier in my writing career? But yeah, it's really, really wonderful when you're reading something and that prompt just triggers that thing in your head, and it just sort of just comes out in an avalanche.
So I think it's because you and I are thinking about sharing writing prompts, back and forth, that I'll give you one, you give me one. And I'm really energized by that because I want to be writing shorter fiction the same way that you are. And I think it would be a fun activity to, give ourselves a time frame and a prompt and kind of just see what we can rough out. We should offer that to our listeners as well. I think it would be a lot of fun to go ahead and share a writing prompt today and put it in the show notes, but we'll read it into the record as well. And if anybody is motivated to give it a shot, please do. And if you want to share it with us and say, hey, this is what I came up with, send us an email at tiffinandwritingworkshop@gmail.com, and, maybe we'll read it on the air. Who knows?
Ooh, I like that. I like this a lot. I like it a lot. You got a prompt? You have a prompt, don't you?
Write a story about finding wisdom in the most unlikely place.
That's easy. That's
Good.
Perfect.
Yeah. And look, it doesn't have to be a 10,000 word tome of wonder. I'm actually thinking of keeping mine under 1,000 words. I'm going to try to go ahead and rough something out. I am going to put a deadline on this, so I can't start until a particular date. I'll share that date with you, Tim. But yeah, after our next interview, we can revisit this and see what we came up with.
I like this a lot.